The dead Seishu controlled my dad to kill me. I quickly sent a green dog head in the comments section. To keep me safe. I saw my dad's devilish pace. With a terrified face, I quickly took a few steps back to keep distance. I asked, Dad, are you okay? My dad immediately changed his face and said, I'm fine. I don't need your care. He grabbed my shoulder again with a cheerful face and said, Go and worship your crazy mother so that our family can be safe. Just like that, I came to my mother's grave in panic. My father pressed my head and said to kowtow to my mother, saying that I would treat you well in the future. I was halfway through my words. A gust of cold wind blew and rolled up all the paper money on the ground and flew directly over my head. At this moment, my heart suddenly tightened. Why were there 3 shadows on the ground? There were only me and my father here. Suddenly, the axe in the shadow's hand was raised high. I looked back with a hard head. My dad was holding an axe and slashed at me viciously. Oh my God. I subconsciously shrank my body. I heard a loud bang and hit the tombstone heavily. My father missed the target and roared with a hideous face and raised the axe to chop at me again. I was paralyzed with fear. Just as I closed my eyes and waited to die, a hand grabbed me from behind. It was my grandpa. He held me with one hand. My father's axe fell on my grandpa's arm, with blood flowing, and even the bones were visible. We just recovered from shock. My father raised the axe in his hand again. Fortunately, my uncle held him tightly from behind. Lee II, you bastard. 3rd grandpa is your father. Jushu is your own son. But my father was completely out of control and kept yelling. But my grandpa saw the problem. He was under the footstepping spell, and a ghost was controlling him from behind. Lai Laoer, he grabbed a handful of incense ash and applied it to the wound, causing his face to twitch in pain, and wrapped it with a piece of cloth. Suddenly, Grandpa bit his finger and drew a symbol in his palm, and then stomped his feet and chanted a strange spell. My father also broke free from his uncle's restraint and roared towards us. Grandpa rushed towards him quickly. He slapped my dad on the forehead and shouted, "Show yourself!" I saw a Tai Chi pattern on my dad's forehead, and he became unsteady. Another figure emerged from his body. When the figure was fully revealed, I was so shocked that I almost couldn't speak. It was the dead 4th uncle. The dead 4th uncle controlled my father and wanted to come back to life. Quickly add your unlucky friends to watch. Let me see which unlucky ones have been tagged. Grandpa was like Uncle Yung possessed. Ordered him to release my father immediately, or he would be scattered into pieces. Unexpectedly, the 4th uncle became more and more hideous, saying that none of us could escape. Then he forced my dad's mouth open. Grandpa questioned the 4th uncle, who was instigating him to do this. 4th uncle smiled sinisterly again. A person who loves you and hates you. Hearing this, we all broke out in a cold sweat. With the sound of the talisman on my father's forehead, 4th uncle was forced to leave my father's body and said coldly, "Our family will be reunited in the underworld soon." and then disappeared into the night sky as a black shadow. Uncle quickly picked up my father and asked if we should just let him run away. Grandpa took a deep breath and said, "Don't chase him. He will come again." We were going to worship my mother and then go down the mountain. Just then, my grandpa suddenly looked unbelieving and suddenly knelt down on the ground. Then he dug like crazy at my mother's grave. My uncle and I were shocked, thinking that Grandpa had also been hit by the spell. My uncle grabbed Grandpa's hand. I quickly hugged Grandpa from behind and told him to stop. Grandpa turned around and said he was fine. My mother's grave had been tampered with and asked us to help dig together. Hearing this, we all breathed a sigh of relief. We dug together with Grandpa. Suddenly, Grandpa told us to stop. We saw blood seeping out of the ground. The strong smell of blood made people feel sick. Grandpa directly reached in with his hand, and soon he took out a package, wrapped in red silk cloth, round, and it was still dripping blood. Grandpa was stunned for a moment before unwrapping it. I screamed in fright. Inside the red silk cloth, it was a wooden baby's head. Grandpa said it was just a part of the wooden baby and pointed to 4 positions for us to continue digging. We even dug out the baby's limbs. I quickly sent 4 dog heads. To keep me safe, Grandpa turned to ask my mother how she buried the baby and asked my mother to tell him everything. I couldn't help but get nervous. Life. I began to tell him what happened after he passed away. When Grandpa heard, Wang Xiaolong gave my father a red coffin. He punched the ground hard. How vicious Wang Xiaolong is. He wanted to kill all of us. Seeing our puzzled looks, Grandpa explained that people usually use black coffins and never use a blood-red coffin. A red coffin is a great evil, which can suppress my mother's residual consciousness. The baby wood carving is a tool for resentment, which can gather the resentment from all directions. When my mother's consciousness completely disappears, the corpse will be completely controlled by the caster. Then it will break out of the coffin. Our whole village will die. Hearing this, my uncle and I were scared to pee. Oh my God. I went to dig my mother's grave, stole neck to dig my mother's grave. I was possessed by my mother. And the purpose of her doing this, just to protect me for one night. If my mother hadn't been lying in my bed that night, the 4th uncle standing outside the window would have killed me. Hearing this, my tears couldn't be stopped, and they fell down patter. Women are weak, but for her child, she is strong. I quickly posted a curse on someone. I hope he will be loved all his life. Grandpa looked at my father, who was lying aside, and blamed himself for giving birth to a retribution, killing such a good woman as my mother. Uncle asked Grandpa what we should do next. Grandpa wasn't sure. These methods form a precise evil spell formation. Once it starts to operate, the consequences of rashly cracking it are unpredictable. The only way now, we must find Wang Xiaolong. When he got home, he drew talismans overnight. To avoid any delays, he was going to prepare and fight with Wang Xiaolong immediately, and gave his uncle 2 talismans for safety. He packed his tools and went to find Wang Xiaolong. I appeared at the door with a determined look, begging Grandpa to take me with him. It's for my mother. Grandpa looked at my determined eyes. Juchu, you've grown up. So Grandpa took me with him to find Wang Jialong, the culprit, walking on the silent village road. I asked Grandpa where he had been all these days. Grandpa looked up at the night sky and sighed deeply. That night, your mother refused to be buried. I thought she was resentful towards your grandma and dad. She refused to leave. I wanted to find a paper maker to make 2 paper figures. Paper figures take their place. I burned them in front of your mother's coffin so that she could let go of her resentment. Now it seems that your mother didn't want to harm them at all. Grandpa sighed. He continued to talk. When we went to the coffin shop to find a paper maker, the shopkeeper wasn't there. But the family next door had an accident. Their few-month-old baby died. Every night, the baby would come back to find them and cried by their bed until dawn before leaving. I saw that the woman was in a bad situation. I was afraid something bad would happen, so I helped them. I was worried that you would be scared alone, so I let you come back to accompany me. Unexpectedly, I killed him. While talking, we saw Wang Xiaolong's house. When we got closer, Grandpa couldn't help but be surprised. Why does Wang Jialong's house look like a dead house? I accidentally broke Grandma's head off. She asked me to pick it up quickly and put it back. She said she didn't want to dream of him and asked me to find a scapegoat. Facing such a bizarre scene, I was scared to cry and shout and ran away. Grandma was chasing me and saying she couldn't bear me and asked me to go with her. I was scared out of my wits. I just kept running forward. When I came to my senses, my scalp was numb. It turned out that I hadn't left the banyan tree at all. I had been running in circles around the banyan tree. And then I heard Grandma's voice from behind. She stretched out her hands to grab me. I screamed wildly in fear. It turned out that Grandpa appeared. He asked me why I was running around the tree like crazy. I pointed at the banyan tree and couldn't speak clearly. Chase me. However, when I looked closely, I found that Grandma had disappeared. Grandpa shouted angrily, "Ghost tree of devouring. How dare you? How dare you hurt my grandson? Tell Grandpa. Who is chasing you? It's Grandma, her head. Her head is gone." Hearing this, the grandpa became extremely sad. He gritted his teeth tightly, saying that he couldn't escape it after all. Your grandma has passed away. Fortunately, you didn't cut off her head. Otherwise, she would really take you away, he said and hugged me tightly. I shed 2 lines of tears. He always talked about holding his great-grandson, but he passed away before you. He really misses you. Someone is using his unfulfilled wish to harm you. I had never seen Grandpa so sad before. And I started crying too. Just then, there was a shout that something happened at home. We were all shocked. As soon as we got home, he kicked the door open angrily and roared angrily, "Who was the evil spirit harming my family?" The scene in front of us still made us gasp. There were 4 big red coffins neatly placed in the yard. Grandpa's hands couldn't stop trembling. We took a closer look. There was a name on each coffin. With my mother's coffin, it matched our family of 5. Grandpa pushed away the coffin with Grandma's name. Grandma's body was indeed lying inside. He felt like his whole being was sucked out. Then he burst into tears with his face green. He slapped the lid of the coffin frantically. It took a long time for him to calm down. At this time, Grandpa found that there were 2 lines of small words on the coffin. Good and evil will be rewarded. You borrowed my life, and you should return it to me.